Welcome to Suzanne's studio, and I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host. Tonight, I am really honored to present my guest, Doug Nelson, who is a Veteran Services Representative for Santa Clara County. And I will tell you one thing, he is really hot.
My wife thinks so.
No, you are. You really are. I didn't know you were so good looking. But anyway, we are having a very serious subject.
Indeed.
And we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about really, that you really want to talk about? Because it's such a vast subject.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
There's some movement afoot in the treatment community to call it post-traumatic stress, because the word disorder might put a stigma on it that we really don't want. It becomes a disorder when we turn this on people who love us and when we turn it on ourselves. It doesn't have to get that bad.
But you had it.
Yes,
You were
I have
in the
it.
Vietnam War.
Yes.
And you're so dedicated to what you're doing. I just was so impressed when my friend Marlene McGowan told me about you. And she said, you absolutely have to interview Doug.
I'll give you a little background. My
Yeah.
captain was killed in Vietnam. I was a resident dumb kid. To make a long story short, I put motor oil in the gas tank of the generator. And when the inevitable happened, the sergeants jumped all over me, and the captain came in and said, look, you can't see a hand in front of your face out there. You send a guy out there without a flashlight, at the very least, put luminous tape around the gas can. Agree among yourselves that it's a gas can, and leave Nelson alone and let him get back to his job. I didn't have a chance to thank him. He was killed just a few days later in a mortar attack. And when these guys come to me, I'm seeing Captain Casey come to the door. I have to do this because he showed me how to take care of people. He took care of me. He took care of all of us. He helped dig the bunker that saved my life. In fact, when I first met him, they said, hey, Doug, I want you to meet the CO. What CO? I don't see any CO. There's a blonde-haired kid at the bottom of a hole shoveling dirt out of the hole. He said, yeah, I'm Captain Casey. I'm not going to have you guys do anything I won't do myself. But if you see me doing it, you're going to do it. And that's Captain Casey. I've got to do what he did.
Of course. But how did your post-traumatic stress syndrome, how did that develop? How did you know you had it, Doug?
I didn't know what I had. I was a mess when I got back. Even though I had 2 years in Japan, and I think what that taught me was that I had no reason to hate Asian people. I loved Japan. But I've always had trouble sleeping. I still have trouble sleeping. You'll go home tonight and you'll lay your head on your pillow, and if you're not asleep already, you'll sleep. We don't sleep. I get up at 2:30 or 3 in the morning. I've got to look outside and make sure everything's all right. Because everything that happened to me in Vietnam happened at night. And when that last mortar round killed Captain Casey, it sounded like everything was breaking. It's like every dish in the house, and pots and pans and everything, is this enormous crash. And if my wife drops a dish, I have more of a startle reflex than the average person. And those of us who have PTSD are like that. Let a box fall off a shelf in Orchard Supply. You know who the veterans are. You can tell.
What do they do?
Jump. Some of them will dive to the floor. But you'll see at least some kind of reaction, some kind of startle reaction. And my startle reaction seems to be more severe as I'm getting older.
Really? You're not, I would think as the years went by, you would get better.
Some things are better. I think I would have to say that most things are better. We get help for this. I sat on this for 40 years before I got any help for it. And I started working here in the Palo Alto healthcare system before I realized, hey, wait a minute, I've got this too. I've got these same symptoms. I'm irrationally angry sometimes. Most women who have been around men, you know we're irrationally angry anyway.
Yes, how true.
The
Yeah.
subject is at hand is not what we're angry about. The anger is global. It's coming from somewhere else.
You say that there's no cure for it, but it is treatable.
It is treatable.
In what way? How do you treat something like that?
By realizing the nature of the beast that followed you home. By talking with other veterans, by being in group, by meeting with a counselor. A counselor, through skilled questioning, will lead you to arrive at some certain truths. One special moment for me was when I told my counselor, I've got to stop wallowing in this. I use less polite language than that because the counselor was a guy. But I can't let this define me. I can't let this run me. I've got to know what my triggers are, whether it's loud noise or whether it's extremely irresponsible behavior on somebody's part. I have to recognize it, and then it can be as simple as taking a very deep breath. A few of those. Calm down. Use the powers of reason to collapse the thing and reframe it. That person revving up a motorcycle with no muffler right next to my car, he's a dumb kid. He doesn't mean anything by it. He's not doing it to get in my face. That's his toy. However you can rationalize it. But the anger is almost always a destructive thing. I want to try to avoid that. With my wife, the trunk of the car is open. It's 110 degrees outside, and she's got raw chicken in the trunk of the car. You know what you do about that? Who bought the food? Who hates grocery stores, so my wife has to go buy the food? Who cooks the food? The way to handle that is to go out there and get the chicken out of the trunk of the car, put it in the fridge. End of problem. No need for anger.
So what you're doing is you're doing behavior modification, really. Is that it?
Yes, and some thought modification. The destructive thoughts come, and I take hold and say, whoa, that's not the best way to handle this. It doesn't always work. Any of us with post-traumatic stress disorder will tell you, it doesn't always work, and we end up apologizing to someone, to our wives, to our neighbor. And then you move on. It's as Dr. Phil's contribution to psychology, own it. Admit it. Own your PTSD. Own the effects that it has. And let clue people who love you in on the fact that you've got this and what's likely to happen. And I've got to tell my wife, honey, it wasn't you. It's not about you.
Are you able, Doug, to get this across to the people you work with? And we're going to talk about women with that condition. I mean, are you able to really affect them?
Well, actually, I'm a paper pusher for claims work. I'm not supposed to be getting into this on my job, but I can't help but get into this because I can see in their faces. These young guys coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan, say, hey, brother, I've got this too. There's no cure. You're not going to wake up someday and not have it. But there's healing from this. There's difference between healing and a cure. A gunshot wound through the leg, there's an entrance wound and an exit wound and there's scar tissue. It's painful sometimes. This has scar tissue. It's going to be painful sometimes. But you learn to live with it like the guy with the leg wound learns to live with the decreased muscle power he has in that leg. You learn to deal with it. You'll have plenty of help here. You know, you go to the vet center, you'll sit around a big table, the 20 guys around the table. And I tell the younger guys, you're going to think you walked into a Flomax commercial. Everybody's the age of your dad, if not your granddad.
Yeah.
But the thing to know about the initial vet center experience is that, number one, you're not alone in this. All these other guys have the same thing. It doesn't matter whether we were in Vietnam and have been sitting on this for 40 years. It doesn't matter if you just came out of Iraq yesterday. We all have this. But the second important thing to remember is, you're not crazy. You're not crazy. Post-traumatic stress is a sane person's reaction to the insanity of being in combat. Our feelings are valid. Our fears, they're ours. They're valid. We should own these fears. We shouldn't try to suppress this. And by all means, don't think that you're weak because you have post-traumatic stress disorder. You're sane.
It's just a horrible condition that you have to live with. How do women react to it? The women that they have to be service people in order to receive all of this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The thing that causes post-traumatic stress is very often different in women. Now, we have more women in combat these days, and they're subjected to the same mortar and rocket attacks and IED explosions as men, and the symptoms are going to be the same. What I'm seeing is women who were sexually assaulted in the military. I mean, we know this stuff happens on the street, this happens in the academic world, it happens in the business world, but the military's been telling everybody for 350 years that they're better. They're no better. And we know, too, that assaults like this, it's not about lust, it's about power. And individuals who perpetrate these things are very often let go. And the poor woman is told, don't make waves. You're making all of us look bad. You'll get over it. No, she doesn't get over it. Because I've seen so many. Colonel Ann Wright, she's also a peace activist, but she says, it's her opinion, that 1 in 3 women in the military have been assaulted.
Is that right?
1 in 3. In Iraq, they were going to use the bathroom in groups because it's safer that way. But they were developing bladder and urinary tract infections because they held it until they could get a group to go. Because they knew of one who went by herself and was assaulted. And shame on these guys. Instead of treating them as sister soldiers and sister Marines, they're treating them as pieces of meat for their entertainment. Mm-hmm. These guys ought to be breaking rocks at Leavenworth for 20 years at hard labor. Never happens. Never happens.
Yeah. This is very depressing.
It is, but the truth needs to be out.
That's it. But what can we do? We as a citizen, mm-hmm. what can I do for you? For the world?
I know what I do as a member of Veterans for Peace. We try to keep people out of the military.
Oh, tell about that.
We tell them, go talk to the recruiter. Go and talk to the recruiter. Mm-hmm. Show him the same courtesy and attention you're showing me. It's fine. Give him 20 minutes. Come back out, give me 10 minutes. I'll tell you how much fun war is. They have a little mobile van with an electronic video game, and they give the kids little electronic guns, and they shoot at people who look like Arabs and knock them over. You think war's fun? Come on out. We'll tell you how much fun it is.
This is Veterans for Peace.
Yes.
What does the U.S. government think about that? Aren't they going to shoot you in the middle of the night?
Oh, we're probably being listened to. There's probably there was surveillance years ago. In fact, the Veterans for Peace and Vietnam Veterans Against the War had a joke that, my God, the FBI agents are the only ones paying their dues. Yeah, they're interested, but we use nonviolence. Never do we get violent. And our problem with parts of the Occupy movement is, what are you doing? What are you doing? Throwing rocks through the windows of Men's Warehouse? Who buys their clothes at Men's Warehouse? Working stiffs who have to go to traffic court. Who are you hurting? You know, breaking up the furniture at some mom and pop coffee shop. Who are you hurting? Non-violence. Non-confrontational. We don't get up in a recruiter's face. We would never do that. Just offer alternatives. We want to get in classrooms and say, why don't you consider this? Live for your country. Don't you think there are people in San Bruno who wish somebody had inspected the pipelines?
Indeed.
Don't you wish there are people on the Gulf Coast who wish somebody had been overseeing oil drilling? Or people in West Virginia who wish that somebody had been monitoring the methane levels in coal mines? And I've pointed to the teacher and say, you want to be a hero? Do what she does every day. Nobody's going to call you a hero, but you'll have these people come back to you later in life and say, I really thank you for teaching me how to do that. Live for your country.
But don't fight for it in war, in military.
No, not men, not women.
But how are we going to get the military? You know, I mean, it's such a yin and yang.
Okay.
I mean,
We are always going to have professionals who want to serve in the military. And these people should be professionals. They should be very good at what they do, but they should be very ethical people. And I think we have a core of good people in the military, particularly in your special operations, your special forces, your SEALs and such. That military operation that took out the pirates who are holding that captive, captain captive, one well-placed shot. That's the only opportunity they had. Only enough violence to do the job, no more. That's a lean, professional military. Unlike a lot of people in Veterans for Peace, I think we need a military, but we need to keep them professional. You never want to let the military do what the military in Argentina did in the late 70s. They rounded up dissidents, most of them students. They drugged them, they tied weights to them and threw them in the sea out of a helicopter. That's why the women in Buenos Aires are marching on alternate Tuesdays or something with pictures of their missing children. You never want to let your military get involved in something like that. I was so embarrassed when I was teaching English in Japan when Kent State happened. I was in Japan for 2 years after I was in Vietnam, and I taught English part-time. And these people were college students. They were my age. They were better educated than I was. But they asked, is this how you handle dissent in America? Do you have soldiers shooting students? I didn't know what to think. I wore a piece of black cloth around my sleeve to work. And the sergeant said, hey, Nelson, take it off or go to jail. I took it off. I mean, so much for commitment. But I didn't want to go to jail.
Exactly. Like what's happening now in North Korea, you know, what they're doing to their prisoners. But we're not going to talk about that. So tell about your pet project.
I'm writing a book for people who have PTSD, and I'm talking about what to do about it and where to go to get help. And I'm not a therapist. I have no training in psychology. I'm speaking from the point of view of one person who has it. And the thing that bothers me about this is that some of these guys who were in combat every single day they were over there, in Vietnam for a year, or in Iraq or Afghanistan, or Iraq and Afghanistan, their post-traumatic stress disorder is probably much more serious than mine. Their anger problems are more serious. The hypervigilance, driving fast through town because you drive fast in Baghdad because the faster you drive, the less impact an IED will have. People who can't stand to be in a crowded place. Costco makes me nervous. I don't know what it is. It's not that I don't want to save money. I just have to get out of there. I read a book in the car while my wife goes in there.
So you still have symptoms, and
sure.
and you admit that you always
of
will.
Course, of course.
Well, what about the veterans that come back that don't have any limbs? I mean,
That's
they probably have much more.
That trauma is a cause of post-traumatic stress disorder right there.
Of course. How do you deal with people like that?
I don't see them. They're in the VA Palo Alto healthcare system, and they get plenty of attention.
Do you think they're getting enough attention?
We'd have to ask them. I don't know. I
Because
think the
it's such
people
an issue.
we didn't get enough attention after Vietnam, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I've talked to one guy who went to the hospital, and he said, look, I'm just jittery. I'm a nervous wreck. I was in combat over in Vietnam. He said, okay, stand over there with the crazies. So he stood over in a corner, and 5 o'clock came, and everybody went home, and he's still standing there.
My God.
I know a doctor at Palo Alto, a psychiatrist, and he said, I was a psychiatry intern when you guys were coming home, and I'm here to tell you we didn't do right by you. He tries to do right by us. He does exams for post-traumatic stress disorder. He's one of my heroes.
Of course, of course. So this really, I mean, I'm asking you a question, but I'm saying what I'm saying. I think that you are so incredibly dedicated with all of this empathy because of what you've gone through. What do you really want to do with this now? I mean, you're working with these people, but you said you're in claims, and that's very important, of course. But what do you envision? What would you really like to do? I think you should go to TED, TED. I told you about that. That is hot, and you're hot. So you've got to find out about that because you have so much to say. Anyway, what do you envision?
We have to teach veterans to do their own claims. For post-traumatic stress disorder and the Agent Orange disabilities from Vietnam, they're not all that hard to do. The present head of the Veterans Administration made all these things easier. It tickles me to hear people come in and say Obama's taken everything away from us. He's done nothing but give.
Yay.
It's easier to claim post-traumatic stress disorder. It's easier to claim these Agent Orange disabilities. More disabilities are related to Agent Orange than they thought before.
What is that?
Dioxin was used in Vietnam, a dioxin-based chemical that was known as Agent Orange. It defoliated jungles very effectively. The enemy hid in jungles. But in retrospect, what did we do? We poisoned the whole country. They have hideous birth defects there now, and we made ourselves sick. There's no diabetes in my family. I have diabetes. I have some numbness in my feet. It shouldn't be there, but I have to pay very careful attention to diet and exercise. I'm the food Nazi in the house. My wife doesn't have diabetes. And she's German. She's of German ancestry.
Yeah.
I'm telling her I can't eat potatoes.
You are really a fascinating gentleman. You have to do something. You have to go on national TV, Doug. You do.
I'm going to retire, but I'm going to continue this kind of work in other ways. I can't sit and do nothing. I don't even like the term retirement. To me, it conjures up an old guy driving a pickup truck aimlessly around, different color socks, you know, his belt buckle undone. I don't want to retire. I've got things. I have things I want to do. I've got writing I want to do.
But you have to. You're so effective, I feel, in helping other people, other veterans. Yeah. I mean, doesn't that kind of thing snowball? I mean, networking, like if you're effective and you teach somebody else and they help and so forth.
Well,
That's what you were saying before.
We have veterans organizations, the
Yeah.
VFW and American Legion.
Yeah.
They have the cinder block buildings with the rusty cannon in the front and, you know, the bar back there. There's nothing wrong with beer drinking and flag waving. You know, there's nothing wrong with them, either singly or combine them if you want. But they have the facilities that call an open house, get veterans in there, and let other veterans who have the Agent Orange disabilities tell you how to do your claim. We'll even sit and do it for you. And if you've got post-traumatic stress disorder, sometimes doing that claim is incredibly easy. There's a fast track. If you have a combat award, we call them Audie Murphy Awards, but Purple Heart, the ultimate combat award. You got wounded. The Army's Combat Infantryman Badge. combat action badge, Marine Corps combat action ribbon. These things are proof that you were in combat. You don't have to tell war stories. They'll send you straight to a doctor who will try to figure out how bad your PTSD is. They'll send you a check every month. Second thing is you'll be a higher priority in the VA healthcare system because you're a service-connected veteran. And I think more importantly, you'll be getting help to help you deal with PTSD and start this healing process.
Yeah.
This is about healing. If it's not about healing, then there's no point in vet centers, there's no point in the VA healthcare system. And we have to preserve these things. We have certain people in our government who think that the VA is an entitlement program. These facilities, these dedicated people, the money could be spent better somewhere else. The money couldn't be spent any better. Who's more entitled than somebody who put his life on the line?
Exactly, exactly.
It doesn't matter. I have my politics as you do, as anybody else. But what I think of the war, or what I think of the war,
Guess what?
Doesn't matter.
I have to stop you. We are at the end.
Okay,
However, we're going to do part 2, thank heavens.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You have been an incredible guest. Even better than I imagined, really. So we'll do part 2. Thank you so much. And I want to thank our crew. They are also wonderful. And I don't think they have posts. I think I do, just because I'm me. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, and I want to thank our audience for watching. I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye.